If ever there was a story and legacy of tenacity, faith, determination, and resiliency, this ghost town was iconic of them all. We'll show you where this all played out right here on Ghost Towns and More. Located in north-central Utah on the eastern slopes of the Tintic Mountains in Utah County are the scant remains of a ghost town called Dividend, where the lives of its founder and several families played out, and their stories are nothing short of legend. It all started in 1869 when the Raditz family immigrated from Germany to St. Louis, Missouri, and decided to build their future on a new farm. But within the first few years, both the mother and father passed away, leaving 5 young boys as orphans. One of those young boys was Emil Raditz. He and his brothers all set out to make their own way in life. Emil worked various jobs, making his way west and working in some mining towns while educating himself on mining and mining law. He eventually married and with his young family settled in Utah, where he became a superintendent of mining operations and rose to prominence in the community. His growing income allowed him to purchase a ranch in La Jolla, California, as well as a beautiful home in Salt Lake City. As his interests in mining expanded, Emil became acquainted with some unworked mining claims on the eastern slopes of the Tintic mountain range. His education and experience convinced him there were untapped ores below the surface, but how deep those riches were was yet to be discovered. Emil decided to rally investors and started up the Tintic Standard Mining Company in 1907, where he and his miners began tunneling into the mountain. After digging for about 400 feet, they felt they were not getting closer to ore, so they decided to dig a vertical shaft in 1909. Mining conditions and living circumstances were difficult. Emil was financing his operation with his own money and with that of investors who were willing to take a chance on his predictions. As the shaft was dug deeper, the heat and gases made work unbearable, so more money had to be invested to ventilate the mine so the miners could continue working. The months began to turn into years with no success, and Emil started to run out of money. He was finally forced to pay his miners in stock certificates. Many of those miners began to lose faith in Emil's operation and quickly exchanged those stock certificates for groceries and liquor in the nearby boomtown of Eureka. Some miners returned the certificates to Emil, doubting that success would come. For 7 years, Emil and his forces labored on with no reward in sight. Emil sold his ranch in La Jolla, and that gave him some money to keep his operation going. Then Emil borrowed money from his mother-in-law to continue his work. When that ran out, he contacted his wife Emma and discussed the possibility of mortgaging their home. Emma told him that she believed in him and his mine. The next day, the bank gave her $10,000 for their home. One can only imagine how Emil must have felt, having been in a good financial situation and now gambling on a business venture with the potential of losing everything. What would it take to get up every day, week after week, month after month, for years to maintain the fervor and drive necessary to face one's fears, to keep believing in something that might not pay off? The stress some days must have been overwhelming. As the months passed, the money from his mortgaged home began to dwindle down to the last few dollars. Even the stores and businesses who previously accepted stock certificates from miners no longer would, because everyone assumed Emil would soon be bankrupt. Others at nearby mines made fun of him, calling his operation the Raditz Folly. As workers continued digging deep into the earth, they struck a rich ore body at the 1,250-foot level. Suddenly, those stock certificates were worth a fortune. The new mining camp turned town needed a name, and a contest was held to come up with that name. Because of the handsome payouts from the new wealth, the winning entry was Dividend. Dividend grew quickly. Emil Raditz was generous and kind to his miners and families. Free movies were available every Wednesday night. On weekends there were baseball games and dances in the amusement hall. There were rows of homes, a community store called the Dividend Trading Company. Shops and services were provided at low cost to the workers and their families, including resident doctors who lived in town. Emil knew what it was like to go without and suffer, so he wanted to provide a good life for all those who worked for him as well as their families. Emil Raditz quickly rose to prominence in the region and expanded his investments into other industries and even traveled to Washington, D.C. to meet with the president. John Westerdahl was the superintendent of Emil's mining operations at Dividend and was also his trusted friend. In 1921, some thieves came into town and held up the store. During the robbery, they killed John Westerdahl and another man. This tragedy was a blow to the town and to Emil and his family. The town would never be the same. Despite the tragedies, the mining operations continued to do well. Emil and his family traveled the world and purchased a second home in California. In 1933, Emil suffered a heart attack and retreated to California to recover, but died in the latter part of that year. His wife died 6 years later of cancer. The mines at Dividend continued to thrive, and by 1949 had paid out $19 million of dividends before the mines finally closed just a few years later. The lower grades of ore deep in the earth were not profitable to mine, and the long-running success of Dividend began to fade. As people left, many of the buildings and homes were either torn down or moved away. One of the town's residents, Mary Felt, described her feelings the day they left Dividend after so many years of living there.
I felt sad as we rounded the turns leaving Dividend and our many friends. Mainly, I had a feeling of emptiness. We lived in Dividend almost a quarter of a century, happy and content. We returned from time to time, hoping to recapture or relive for a moment some of the pleasant memories we have stored in our minds about our town and friends. But each time it seemed less possible that a town with all its activities ever existed there. Foliage, sagebrush, cedar trees, and wild flowers are again painting the scene. Not a road or spot which might indicate where our house once stood. It is now a ghost town, much to our sorrow.
Today there is hardly anything left of Dividend except for some concrete foundations and new mining activity in the surrounding areas. But the memory of Emil Raditz and his family, the legacy and history they made, shows that tenacity, resilience, careful education, and planning can pay off and be a great benefit to many.